Throughout the endless library of video games that exists for consumers everywhere to enjoy, there is endless variety when it comes to how you yourself prefer to engage with the medium. If you enjoy the thrill of victory and getting the competitive edge on an opposing player, you're likely to steer towards games like Counter-Strike, League of Legends, or perhaps one of the hundreds of fighting games out there. Whereas if you derive the most enjoyment from games within the tale it tells or the attachment to characters you'll meet as you progress through, then typically more single-player games with rich stories guiding your attention as if it were a denser, more involved movie, think The Last of Us or Red Dead Redemption, will pique your interest infinitely more. Regardless of how you break down which games you prefer to play, the common aspect between all of them is that whichever highlighting feature is contained within their gameplays continue to pull you in and tend to appeal to your own personality as a whole. But there is one specific style of game design which I feel captures all sorts of gamers out there without needing to be a definitive genre on its own. Welcome to Figuring Out Fantasy, where we'll be tackling the art of immersion in video games, and understanding just what makes the element of making your choice matter lead to the most gripping style of gameplay to experience when it comes to being fully immersed within the virtual world you'll find yourself taking a part in. If you enjoy all things fantasy, you're in the perfect place. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you like the video and want to continue getting more in your feed. Firstly, what do I mean by your choices matter as it pertains to being a feature within a video game? It could appear to be self-explanatory, but the intricacies concerning just how it's executed can give varying levels of immersion. You could say that within the given game that you're playing, that any decision you make realistically matters towards achieving your desired outcome. But the kinds of choices which encompass the games that I'll be highlighting in this video typically involve diversifying each individual's unique experience compared to another given consumer playing their iteration of the same story. Understanding that we're dealing with some choices that heavily influence the course of a story, I'm going to throw a spoiler warning out there for any games that may come up. If you want to play and enjoy it firsthand, I would click off as it's brought up. That being said, the concept of being able to go and discuss my playthrough of a game with a friend and hear in response an entirely different experience is the defining factor of what possibilities video games offer in the entertainment industry. And arguably the greatest example of this in recent time with Larian Studios' Baldur's Gate 3, we can see how immensely relevant it stayed since its record-breaking release earlier this year. Beyond the incredible polish and supremely deep customization options that surround a massive and secret-ridden world, the greatest draw for Baldur's Gate is that no two playthroughs of this game will look the same. While the same world will be traversed through every group's journey, the variance comes with the countless amounts of dialogue options and opportunities to succeed in dice rolls which end up shaping your relations with certain characters and factions, as well as how they proceed with either helping or denouncing you. This immersion even starts before you're actively playing the game, where you have options to establish what sort of background you want your character to take on the personality of. A history filled with breaking the law and leveraging illegal connections will encourage the player to make decisions reminiscent of that story with opportunities to bank valuable rerolls through executing actions that pertain to it. Like how they would prefer to steer their choices in dialogue with nobility towards that of natural distaste for that culture. Or a bit more gruesome of an example, in literally being rewarded for murdering an innocent civilian. This makes the innate sense of missing out on certain dialogue paths or fights by choosing other ones or staying passive almost entirely go away. You understand that there is differing content or relation building opportunities in another direction, but it doesn't feel like a penalty or something that you must replay to get the best option available. It feels like it was a choice that you made out of either your own personal moralities and judgments, or as a part of the specific character persona you're aiming to establish within the world. Being derivative of the 5th edition to the ever-popular Dungeons & Dragons, it was almost a no-brainer that Baldur's Gate 3 and other games like it are meant to present a full-fledged immersive experience. But sometimes the sheer density of content within the game can force you to get lost in the full scope of the story at times. Many may see these diverging paths and countless options to be distractions from the overarching storyline concerning the Mind Flayers and the origin characters within your camp. But I believe its value as a contribution towards how immersive of an experience Baldur's Gate truly fleshes out to be is monumental, as your ability to achieve the most fulfilling experience within a game like Baldur's Gate is abundantly reliant on these optional questlines and relation-building experiences outside of what is understood to be the most relevant path to follow. Some of my most enjoyable encounters in the game were from going off that beaten path that was pushing me towards the shiny quest marker, or choosing that far-fetched dialogue option. When the choices are truly at your fingertips, it's almost impossible to not feel a sense of having tailored the course of the game in your personal favor. Though while being, in my opinion, integral to undergoing the most immersive video game experiences, this unhooking of the leash doesn't necessarily need to be the only way to achieve such a cinematic storytelling which makes you feel a part of the developing action. There are other options which put these storytelling tactics on display in a bit less intimidating of a manner to allow for the most natural form of immersion. One of the most critically acclaimed franchises of all time in Mass Effect certainly doesn't lack in its depth of character relationships that persist around you, as well as choices to influence your own with nearly every other individual to exist within the game. And the most glaring influence of Mass Effect and another game I will be talking more on later is the understanding of while it's not as expansive in scale and content as an example like Baldur's Gate, it has an extremely refined story with an incredible amount of depth not exactly needing to be presented in the shape of a wide open world. While existing on a bit more of a streamlined manner than Baldur's Gate, Mass Effect managed to fit the player into the shoes of the complex character Shepard while being capable of allowing the course of the story to take shape as you choose, whether you're happy with your decisions or not. You are constantly on your toes and become analytical of nearly every character's interactions, not only with Shepard, but with one another as you begin to form biases and ideas of how you believe the story should play out. This is one of the most defining aspects of allowing decisions to be made in your game in any manner at all. Every given consumer is going to have their unique impressions on a situation, whether it be an intense clash of firepower between factions, or even something as simple as how a character is introduced to you in the story. And the factor of anticipation based on these impressions will always exist within games where you don't know the direction being taken next. But the difference in immersion is just how much influence you have on shaping the result to match how you felt the course of events should have gone. Now, this isn't to say that you get to steer clear of any and all consequences by making the right decisions. No. That's where these games begin to feel on a plane apart from your typical gaming experiences. One of Mass Effect's most defining characteristics is just how many decisions you're forced to make where all options have an apparent price to pay. But even beyond this, many of the outcomes and results of your choices are based on how you've approached the rest of the game as a whole beyond just the instant's tough dialogue choice to make. A clear example of this is the suicide mission from Mass Effect 2. All of the choices you've made and relationships you've built have led you to this point, and you must rely on this raw accumulation of knowledge to properly assign roles to your squad mates in order to allow for the mission to be executed properly. Not only this, but upgrading your ship the Normandy is also an integral part to ensuring the success of the clash with the Collectors, emphasizing the importance of indulging in every aspect the game has to offer. All the members of your crew could survive and live to tell the tale, or each and every one of them could die, leaving all of your choices up to this point to be for naught. And the natural flow of how the event approaches in the story makes the player feel true sense that this is the final chapter to you and your crew's epic journey. Once you go through the Omega 4 relay, there is no turning back or engaging with anything prior in the story. But the game does tell you this just in the form of how many other pivotal moments have been presented in the game, through dialogue. It could be seen as a niche detail or direction choice as a warning to the player for the final sequence to begin, but I think it's on a bit more clever of a level than just a simple warning. The developers even went into this aspect of the build-up to this chapter of Mass Effect 2, saying how they contemplated many options, including a warning screen asking you to confirm your confidence in your preparation, as likely seen in many other can't-go-back moments in gaming. But to make this final choice to proceed within the dialogue options you've seen shape the course of events throughout the rest of the game, I feel adds just that extra layer of touch to blend gameplay with meaningful choices. And while Mass Effect emphasizes the importance of the relationships with the allies around you, I have to give credit to the inspiration for this video in a possibly unexpected title. When Triangle Strategy came out, many fans of the classic Final Fantasy entry, Final Fantasy Tactics, were foaming at the mouth for a chance to bring themselves back to the good old days with those deep and layered combat and RPG elements that they were able to only experience in a game like Tactics prior. But I don't think many anticipated the heavyweight class decisions you would be forced to sort of make. I say sort of because this game introduced an incredibly interesting gameplay feature, which I'll admit didn't capture my full admiration at first, but as decisions became more difficult to make and carried further and further possible consequences, it only proved to be one of my favorite immersive directions taken by any game. The Scales of Conviction combines your authority in influencing the course of events in the story with a reinforcement of the importance to the numerous allies that walk alongside you throughout that story. By giving the player opportunities to get an impression of nearly every character and their position on a given impasse amongst our heroes, it allows for the key gameplay feature of thrusting the responsibility of choice into the hands of the Scales of Conviction to feel like you face a tumultuous task each and every time Sarah Noah requests for them to be brought out. You are forced to influence the choices of your fellow men and women in arms whenever there's a large decision to be made that would steer the course of events in sometimes 2 or 3 different directions. At the end of the day, it's not all that difficult to sway your allies in your favor, but the process of maneuvering to each and every one of them and forming a dialogue which sometimes sounds convincing of another option entirely, removes the blunt nature of leaving so much to which single dialogue option the player chooses. And I'll admit, there was a few times that I wasn't able to convince a fellow party member of a decision that I wanted to make, and the Scales of Conviction ended up turning me in an entirely different direction. But even though I wanted to go and see the other options I could have chose, I almost felt like it was a more natural experience to go with what my allies had picked for the decision to make. With how much political clashing there is within the story of Triangle Strategy, it's incredibly beneficial to have this sort of involvement from each and every character within your allied forces. There are many different characters from different backgrounds, possessing varying levels of relation to our main protagonist. So the idea of being given a choice to make or influence, and instantly feeling like you understand the clear and correct option to make, doesn't really exist. The game evolves into a process of those closest to the main character slowly revealing where they stand and will continue to stand as these decisions progress to be more and more consequential, which, unbeknownst to the player, begins a development of leaning to one particular side as more and more decisions begin to roll in, giving a chance to reinforce a stance you established through a previously made decision. While I said that many decisions came with a large degree of contemplation, there were certainly some that felt like no-brainers. But it was incredibly interesting to hear from others who had played through the game just which of my easiest decisions were some of their hardest, allowing them their own personalized interpretation of the story. And this makes sense as different character traits from those exposed to us will appeal in a varying manner with different people experiencing the story. For example, one of my favorite allies was Eridor the Knight, a loyal soldier of House Wolfort and cherished friend of the father of our protagonist Sarah Noah. So to hear that he leaned in the same direction as I was in the final acts to the story, made one of the most gut-wrenching decisions feel just that much more like it was the one I was setting myself up to make the entire time. And no matter which of these 3 examples I've discussed up to this point you look at, this resonating feeling is consistent within each and every one of them. You feel not only that you followed your character's chosen course throughout the story, but that it makes the absolute most sense it possibly could due to your direct involvement with how its events played out. I can't sing enough praise for this direction of gameplay, and I can only hope to receive entries from other franchises which aim to pull me into a world where I can come away with yet another personalized experience pushed to the limit by genius storytelling.